Barron Trump, despite being the son of a former president, has spent much of his young life trying to navigate the world with as little attention as possible. At 17, he has mastered the art of blending in, keeping his head down, and avoiding unnecessary scrutiny. As he arrives at Dallas Love Field Airport, his demeanor is calm and unassuming, just another traveler waiting to board his flight. He finds a seat near gate C-12, his long frame folding into a chair that seems almost too small for his stature. He scrolls through his phone, absorbed in his own world, unaware that within moments, his quiet routine will unravel into a public spectacle. The hum of the airport is a familiar symphony. Boarding calls, rolling suitcases, hurried footsteps, but a single voice cuts through the noise like a blade. A gate agent, an older man with sharp features and an air of impatience, zeroes in on Barron. There's something about the teenager's relaxed posture, his casual hoodie and sneakers, that seems to bother him. The agent's gaze lingers a little too long before he strides over with deliberate intent. "Excuse me, young man," he says, his voice carrying a note of suspicion. "Are you sure you're in the right boarding group?" Barron looks up, momentarily startled but maintaining his composure. His response is polite but firm, a testament to his upbringing. "Yes, I have a first-class ticket." But the agent isn't convinced. His eyes flicker to the phone in Barron's hand, the way he carries himself, reserved yet self-assured. Doubt festers in the man's expression, and instead of acknowledging the response, he presses further, his skepticism deepening. The moment is charged with an undercurrent of tension, though Barron refuses to let it show. He extends his boarding pass, his name, Barron Trump, clearly displayed on the screen. The gate agent hesitates, his lips tightening into a thin line as he reads it aloud, his expression shifting from mere suspicion to something more guarded. Instead of waving Barron through, as he would any other passenger with confirmed ticket, the agent stiffens. His voice, when he speaks again, lacks any trace of cordiality. "Wait here." Around them, a few heads turn. Passengers begin to whisper, sensing that something is unfolding, though they can't quite put their finger on why. Why would a young man with a legitimate first-class ticket be held back? Why the unnecessary scrutiny? Barron exhales quietly, keeping his expression neutral. It's not the first time he's been singled out, but something about this feels different, more pointed, more deliberate. And, as he will soon find out, it's about to escalate. The murmur of the surrounding passengers grows louder. Some have pulled out their phones, recording the exchange, their curiosity piqued by the unusual scene unfolding before them. Barron shifts slightly, feeling the weight of their stares. He had always been aware that his last name carried a certain gravity, one that invited both admiration and hostility. But today, it wasn't his family name drawing attention. It was something else, something unspoken but deeply felt. Minutes pass, but instead of resolving the matter, the gate agent returns with a supervisor, a middle-aged man with a stern expression that does nothing to ease the tension. "There seems to be an issue with your ticket," the supervisor says, his tone clipped. "You'll need to step aside while we sort this out." A flicker of disbelief crosses Barron's face. "What issue?" he asks, his voice steady but edged with growing frustration. "I booked this ticket weeks ago." Passengers nearby exchange skeptical glances. A woman with a toddler on her hip speaks up, her voice tinged with irritation. "What's the problem?" "He's just a kid with a ticket. Let him board." But her words go unheard. The gate staff remain resolute, unmoved, and Barron suddenly realizes that this situation has gone beyond a simple misunderstanding. This isn't about protocol. This is personal. The tension, already thick, threatens to snap like a taut wire. Barron, though calm, feels his patience wearing thin. The supervisor fixes him with an unreadable expression and makes yet another demand. "We're unable to verify your identity through the system," he claims. "Do you have another form of identification?" Barron's brow furrows. "My passport is in my carry-on bag," he replies, measured but firm. "You didn't even check it." For the first time, the supervisor hesitates. He hadn't expected such a quick, logical response. And yet, rather than backing down, he doubles down. "Sir, this isn't just about ID. There are procedures we need to follow." That word, procedures, land heavily in the air, hollow and vague. Barron isn't buying it. and neither of the passengers who have been watching, their murmurs turning into quiet outrage. A man in his 50s, standing near the boarding line, shakes his head. "This is ridiculous," he mutters under his breath. But the airline staff won't budge. They are determined to push this further, and before Barron can protest again, a pair of airport security officers appear. Their presence unmistakable, their intention clear. This is no longer just an inconvenience. This has become an ordeal, a deliberate exercise in power. And as Barron watches the officer step toward him, his heart pounds, not with fear, but with sheer disbelief at how quickly things have spiraled. What was supposed to be a simple flight has now become a spectacle. And the worst part? It's only just beginning. Barron watches as the two security officers approach, their expressions unreadable yet unmistakably authoritative. He exhales, tightening his grip on his carry-on bag, willing himself to stay composed. The last thing he wants is to make a scene. "Sir, please come with us," one officer says, his tone even but firm. Barron blinks. Come with them? For what? He hasn't committed a crime. He hasn't caused a disruption. He hasn't even raised his voice. All he did was try to board his flight. "Is this really necessary?" he asks, keeping his voice level, though he feels the weight of 100 eyes on him. "We just need to ask you a few questions," the officer replies. The vague wording does little to mask the reality of the situation. Barron is being detained, however, unofficially. Passengers whisper among themselves, their murmurs thick with skepticism and quiet disapproval. A few pull out their phones, discreetly recording, sensing that something about this isn't right. Reluctantly, Barron nods, adjusting the strap of his bag over his shoulder. He won't resist. He won't argue. But he won't forget this moment either. With measured steps, he follows the officers down the terminal. Behind him, the whispers grow louder. Barron is led into a small, sterile room off to the side of the terminal, a cold, windowless space designed to make people uncomfortable. A simple metal table and 2 chairs sit in the center, looking more like an interrogation setup than a customer service office. One of the officers gestures to the chair. "Take a seat, son." Barron obliges, placing his carry-on at his feet, but his patience is wearing thin. He's been held back from boarding, pulled aside, walked through the terminal like a criminal, and now this? For what? The second officer flips through Barron's passport, glancing between his photo and his face. The absurdity of it all is almost laughable. It's his legal identification, issued by the government. What else do they need? "This is ridiculous," Barron mutters, running a hand through his hair. One officer looks up. "We're just following protocol, son." Barron almost scoffs. There's that word again, protocol. A convenient excuse. A meaningless explanation. He leans forward slightly, leveling a gaze at the officer. "Then tell me something. Would this be happening if my last name wasn't Trump?" The room falls silent. The officers exchange a glance, but neither answers, because deep down they both know the truth. Meanwhile, miles away in the back seat of a black SUV weaving through Dallas traffic, Melania Trump is about to learn that her quiet trip to see her son has taken an unexpected turn. Her phone buzzes, a flood of messages lighting up the screen in rapid succession. Friends, staff, even random well-wishers are alerting her to a situation unfolding at the airport. At first, she scrolls with curiosity, but then she sees a video. A short clip, already spreading on social media, shows Barron surrounded by security, being led away from the gate. His face is calm, but the circumstances are anything but. Melania's lips press into a thin line, her eyes narrowing as she replays the video. Twice. The driver glances at her through the rear-view mirror. "Everything all right, ma'am?" Melania barely looks up. "No. Drive faster." Her voice is cool but firm, the kind of command that brokers no argument. The SUV surges forward, cutting through traffic. Melania Trump is on her way. And when she arrives, she will not be ignored. Back at the airport, Barron remains seated in the small room, his fingers tapping an absent rhythm against the table. He has no idea what's happening outside, no idea that his mother is less than 5 minutes away. And when she arrives, the energy in the terminal shifts. The moment Melania Trump steps through the airport doors, heads turn. There is no need for an introduction. Her presence alone commands attention. She moves through the crowd with purpose, her heels clicking against the polished floor, her posture unwaveringly poised. Passengers part instinctively, muttering in recognition. That's Melania Trump. She's here for Barron. Her gaze sweeps over the terminal, scanning, assessing. Within seconds, she locks onto a cluster of airline employees huddled near the gate. The same gate where her son was stopped. Without hesitation, she strides forward. "Excuse me," she says, her tone polite yet ice-cold. "Where's my son?" The airline employee blinks, caught off guard by the sheer force of her presence. "Ma'am, let me check." Melania doesn't wait for an answer. She is already moving, already determined to find Barron herself. The moment Melania reaches the security office where Barron is being held, the officers stiffen. She steps inside, her expression unreadable, her energy unmistakable. What is going on here? Her voice is calm, yet it carries the weight of absolute authority. One of the officers stumbles over his words. "Mrs. Trump, this is just standard protocol." She cuts him off with a single look. "Protocol?" Her tone sharpens, slicing through the air like a blade. "You are holding my son in a small room with no explanation. What kind of protocol is that?" The supervisor appears in the doorway, pale and visibly flustered. "Mrs. Trump, this is all a misunderstanding." She tilts her head slightly, studying him with an icy gaze that could freeze time itself. "A misunderstanding?" Her voice remains composed, but her meaning is razor-sharp. "Tell me, do you treat all passengers this way? Or just the ones you decide don't belong?" The room falls silent. The officers exchange nervous glances. The supervisor shifts uncomfortably. No one dares to answer, because in that moment, they all know they mess with the wrong mother. The weight of Melania's words hangs in the air like an unspoken verdict. The supervisor looks cornered, his face paling as sweat beads along his temple. He shifts his stance, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides, as if grappling for an excuse that doesn't sound flimsy under the intensity of her gaze. "Mrs. Trump, please understand," he begins, his voice wavering. "We flagged his name in the system, and that required additional checks." Melania tilts her head slightly, her lips press into a thin, unimpressed line. "Flagged? Because he's my son? Or because someone decided he didn't belong in first class today?" The officers exchange uneasy glances. They don't respond, not right away, because they know there's no real justification for what happened. One of them clears his throat. "It's standard procedure, ma'am. We weren't aware of his relation to you until just now." Melania narrows her eyes. "So this is about his last name, then?" The room falls into an uncomfortable silence. No one refutes it. She exhales slowly, as if measuring her next words carefully, knowing that whatever she says next will carry weight. "Save your excuses," she finally says, her voice as sharp as glass. "I want to speak to someone in charge. Now!" The supervisor hesitates, but eventually nods, defeated. He steps out of the room, reaching for his radio. Melania doesn't watch him go. Her focus has already shifted. She turns to Barron, her expression softening for the first time. She places a hand on his shoulder, a silent but powerful reassurance. "Are you okay?" she asks quietly. Barron nods, but his jaw is tight, his frustration barely concealed. "Yeah, I'm fine. They've just been wasting my time." She gives his shoulder a reassuring squeeze, then turns back to the officers. "Let me make something clear," she says, her voice regaining its steel. "You have humiliated my son in front of dozens of people. This is not about protocol. This is about respect or the lack of it." Moments later, the supervisor returns, this time with a higher-ranking airport official. The man, dressed in a Navy suit, extends a hand to Melania in an attempt at formality. She doesn't take it. "I understand there's been a misunderstanding," he begins, his voice carefully measured. "I assure you, we will be reviewing this incident and taking appropriate action." Melania arches an eyebrow. "Appropriate action?" she repeats, her tone dripping with disbelief. "Does that include addressing the staff who escalated this without cause? Or perhaps reviewing the footage that will show exactly how this all began?" The official visibly tenses. He wasn't expecting this level of scrutiny. "We can certainly pull up the footage, ma'am," he says after a pause. "Do it." Within minutes, a laptop is placed on the table and grainy security footage fills the screen. The room is silent as they watch. The video plays in black and white, showing Barron sitting quietly near the gate before the gate agent approaches him with suspicion. They watch as the agent's body language shifts, his posture stiff, his gestures bordering on aggressive. They watch Barron respond politely, his confusion growing as more staff intervene. Then, they see the moment security steps in, leading him away from the gate like a suspect instead of a paying passenger. Melania doesn't react at first. She watches until the very last second, absorbing every detail. Then she looks up. "Now," she says smoothly, "would you care to explain why this happened?" The supervisor stammers. The official shifts uncomfortably, and for the first time, they truly have no answer. Melania doesn't wait for excuses. "You owe my son a public apology." The official blinks. "Of course, ma'am, we—" "No," she interrupts. "Not behind closed doors. Not in this room. Out there, where this all started." The command in her voice is unmistakable. There is no room for negotiation. The official swallows hard and nods reluctantly. Moments later, they walk back to the gate, where passengers are still lingering, waiting to see what would happen next. The murmurs ripple through the crowd as Melania and Barron return, this time with the airport officials in tow. The supervisor steps forward, clears his throat, and addresses the waiting passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen," he begins, his voice uneasy, "I'd like to take a moment to apologize for a situation that occurred earlier today. A misunderstanding involving one of our passengers, Mr. Barron Trump, led to actions that were unnecessary and inappropriate." A ripple of murmurs moves through the crowd. Some passengers exchange glances, while others nod in agreement. "I want to make it clear," the supervisor continues, "that this young man did nothing wrong. The incident was entirely due to an error on our part, and for that, we deeply regret the inconvenience and discomfort caused." Barron stands quietly, hands in his pockets, his face unreadable. But inside, he feels the weight of the moment, not just for himself, but for every person who has ever been made to feel small in a public setting. As the supervisor steps back, Melania steps forward. All eyes are on her. "Thank you for your words," she begins, her voice measured but resolute. But words are not enough. The room falls completely silent. This is not just about my son. It is about the principle of treating every individual with respect and dignity, regardless of who they are or where they come from. She pauses, letting the words sink in. "My son may carry a name that draws attention," she continues, "but he is also a person, a young man who deserves to be treated fairly, just as every passenger in this airport does." A wave of applause erupts through the gate. Some passengers stand in solidarity. Others nod with quiet approval. Melania's words don't just settle the matter. They ignite a conversation. As the crowd settles, a woman with a toddler steps forward. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for what you went through," she says softly, looking at Barron. "It wasn't right." Melania smiles graciously, her eyes warm. "Thank you. That means a lot." Barron nods in quiet gratitude, still processing everything. As they make their way to the VIP lounge, where they'll wait for their rescheduled flight, the airline staff scramble to accommodate them. Offers of refreshments, priority boarding. They go out of their way now. Melania waves them off. "This isn't about perks," she says quietly to Barron. "It's about the principle." He nods, understanding more than ever. As they settle into their seats on the plane, Barron puts on his headphones, staring out the window. Melania pulls out her phone. Her fingers fly across the screen. Moments later, a tweet appears. "Today, my son experienced something no one should have to endure, being judged before being understood. This serves as a reminder to treat everyone with dignity, no matter their name or background. Respect is universal. Let's do better." The post spreads like wildfire, and as the plane lifts off the runway, Barron knows that this was more than just a bad experience. It was a lesson in standing up, speaking out, and refusing to be made small.